They handcuffed a Black SEAL sniper in court. Then a 4-star general entered, and everyone froze. The sterile, glass-walled boardroom in Chicago felt like a high-tech tomb. Red warning lights flashed across a massive screen, reflecting in the stunned faces of the firm's top executives. A skull and crossbones icon pulsed rhythmically, a digital heartbeat signaling the death of their data. This is a complete system failure. The voice of Marcus Thorne, the new chief technology officer, was sharp and cold. He jabbed a finger not at the screen, but toward the end of the polished table. The breach originated from a vulnerability in our offline archives. His department. All eyes turned to Elias Vance. At 68, Elias had been the firm's chief archivist for 4 decades, a quiet man who moved through the modern office like a ghost from another era. He stood silently, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the panic in the room. His hands, though wrinkled, were steady. Marcus smirked, a predator sensing weakness. "We have terabytes of dusty, undocumented junk creating backdoors. I flagged this a month ago." He held up his sleek, silver tablet, its screen glowing with charts. Modern problems require modern solutions, not a fire hazard run by a man who still uses paper. The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Elias didn't flinch. His gaze simply lowered to the old, leather-bound ledger he'd placed on the table's edge. Its worn cover was a map of wrinkles, much like his own hands. Across the room, Chloe Reed, a junior analyst, felt a hot flush of anger. She watched Marcus, so confident and cruel, and then Elias, who seemed to shrink under the weight of the accusation. The silence of the other executives was an endorsement of the cruelty. They were scared, and Marcus had given them a target. Whispers slithered across the boardroom. "The archives! I didn't even know we still had them." Marcus is right. Everything should have been migrated. The executives, desperate to avoid the CEO's gaze, nodded in agreement, cementing Elias as the scapegoat. The narrative was set. The old man and his old ways had doomed them all. The firm's CEO, Ms. Albright, a woman known for her icy composure, looked at Elias. "Is this true, Mr. Vance? Is your department the source of this vulnerability?" Elias met her gaze, his eyes clear. He didn't offer a defense, only a simple, dignified act. He gently pushed his worn ledger toward the center of the table. The book slid across the polished wood, coming to a stop directly in front of Marcus's gleaming tablet. The contrast was stark. One object holding a lifetime of handwritten knowledge, the other a portal to the very chaos that had engulfed them. It was a quiet, defiant gesture that went unnoticed by most. But Chloe saw it. She also saw Elias's eyes drift for a half-second to a small, unmarked maintenance panel on the far wall. A detail so insignificant that no one else registered it. It was a flicker of hidden knowledge, a glimpse of a plan forming behind the serene mask. Marcus, however, was too blinded by his own brilliance to see any of it. He chuckled, picking up the ledger with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "What's this, your diary? Are you going to bore the hackers into submission?" He tossed it back, a dismissive flick of the wrist. It was a profound miscalculation. He thought he was mocking a relic. He had no idea he was disrespecting the key. "The ransom is $10 million, Ms. Albright announced, her voice tight. "They want it in 12 hours, or the data is wiped forever." "Marcus, what is your solution?" Marcus squared his shoulders, a general addressing his troops. "My team is executing a counterattack. We're deploying our best decryption algorithms. We'll break their encryption before the deadline." He radiated confidence, but Chloe saw the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. He was performing, not problem-solving. As Marcus directed his team of young coders, their keyboards clicking in a frantic rhythm, Elias did something else. He quietly walked to an old bookshelf in the corner of the boardroom, a relic from the original office design. He pulled out 3 thick, dust-covered manuals, Their titles faded with age. Returning to his seat, he opened his ledger, its pages filled with neat, handwritten columns of codes, dates, and notations. "What is he doing?" one of the executives muttered. Marcus glanced over, scorn dripping from his voice. "Probably looking up the Dewey Decimal System for how to retire gracefully. Let the adults handle this." Chloe watched, fascinated. Elias wasn't panicking. He wasn't even looking at the terrifying screen. He was methodically cross-referencing entries in his ledger with diagrams in the old manuals. His finger would trace a line of ink, then tap a specific point on a schematic. He was reading a language no one else in the room knew. The ledger was no longer just a book. It had become his primary tool, his weapon in a silent war. Chloe realized then that Elias wasn't retreating into the past. He was retrieving something from it. Hours bled into one another. Marcus's team hit wall after wall. Their frantic energy curdled into despair. "The encryption is military grade," a young coder admitted, his face pale. "We can't break it." The room's atmosphere grew heavy with the stench of failure. All eyes were on Marcus, whose confident mask was beginning to crumble. His jaw was clenched, a tiny muscle twitching beside his eye. Ms. Albright's patience snapped. She turned away from Marcus, her gaze falling on the one person in the room who wasn't staring at a screen. "Elias," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Can you help us?" Marcus started to object. "CEO Albright, with all due respect, he can't possibly." But Elias was already standing. He closed his ledger, tucked it under his arm, and walked not toward the computers, but to the blank wall Chloe had seen him glance at earlier. He ran his hand over the smooth paint until he felt a faint seam. From his pocket, he pulled out not a keycard or a fob, but an old simple brass key. He inserted it into a lock so perfectly hidden it was invisible. With a soft click, the panel opened. Inside wasn't a tangle of modern wires, but a series of heavy-duty physical switches and a thick, circular data port that hadn't been standard in 30 years. A deep, mechanical hum started, a sound of dormant power waking up. The other executives stood up, their chairs scraping against the floor. Marcus stared, his mouth slightly agape. That's impossible. That hardware was disconnected. "It's junk." Elias ignored him. He began flipping the switches in a precise sequence, a physical rhythm he knew by heart. On the main monitor, the red skull flickered. Then it vanished. It was replaced by a single line of green text. "System restoration initiated. Offline archive 7. The room went utterly silent. The only sound was the steady, powerful hum from the wall. A sound of salvation coming from the most unexpected place. The green progress bar moved across the screen, restoring decades of the company's lifeblood. The data wasn't just recovered. It was pristine, untouched by the attack. The executives, who hours ago had silently condemned Elias, now stared at him with a mixture of awe and shame. Their whispers changed from criticism to disbelief. "How did he do that? That system isn't on any modern schematic." Ms. Albright walked over to Elias, her expression unreadable. "You built a vault," she said, less a question than a statement. "A completely air-gapped, analog backup system." Marcus, desperate to reclaim control, stepped forward. "A brilliant contingency. I was just about to order my team to inspect the firm's legacy hardware. We would have found it." The lie was so transparent it was painful. Ms. Albright turned, her eyes flashing with ice. "No, Marcus, you wouldn't have. Because you declared it junk in your first system audit and signed the order to have it scrapped. An order," she added, her voice dropping, "that Elias thankfully never carried out." She turned back to the old man. "Elias? Why didn't you say anything?" Elias looked from the restored screens to the faces around him, his expression not triumphant, but weary. He patted the cover of his old ledger. "Some things you don't protect with a stronger password," he said, his voice soft but clear enough to fill the silent room. "You protect them by taking them off the map. Marcus and his team are experts on the map. I just remembered where the Real treasure was buried." A year later, the 45th floor of the Chicago high-rise looked different. What was once a series of executive suites was now the headquarters of the firm's new Integral Risk and Legacy Systems division. At its head was Elias Vance. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a foundational pillar. His job was to teach a new generation of analysts how to build systems that were not just fast, but resilient. The story of his silent counterattack had gone viral within the tech security world. A modern fable about the wisdom of experience. The Vance Protocol, as it became known, was now a gold standard in data protection, a hybrid strategy that blended cutting-edge cloud security with isolated physical fail-safes. Major corporations sent their people to learn from the quiet archivist who had saved a billion-dollar firm with a key and a book. His lead analyst was Chloe Reed. She stood beside him now, looking at a schematic that integrated a quantum server with a manual switching system. "So the final key is never digital?" she asked. Elias smiled, tapping an old leather-bound book on the table. "A new ledger for a new era. Never. The most important things need a human hand to turn the key." He was no longer just preserving the past. He was building a safer future with it. Marcus Thorne still worked at the firm. He hadn't been fired, but his fall was just as profound. His office was a small, glass-walled cubicle on the 45th floor, inside the very division he had once mocked. He was a junior analyst in Elias Vance's department. His title, his authority, and his arrogance had all been stripped away. We see him hunched over his desk, not his signature silver tablet, but one of the heavy, dust-covered manuals from the boardroom shelf. He was slowly, painstakingly trying to understand the system he had dismissed. He traced the old schematics with his finger, his expression a mixture of frustration and a new, unfamiliar humility. He overheard Chloe and Elias talking nearby, their conversation easy and collaborative. He didn't look up. There was nothing personal in his demotion, and that somehow made it worse. It wasn't revenge. It was a correction. He wasn't a villain who had been slain. He was simply a student who had been forced to learn that he was not the master. True strength is rarely found in the loudest voice or the newest technology. It's often silent, hidden in the steady hands of experience, in the wisdom that remembers the foundations upon which everything else is built. It is the patience to maintain the old lighthouse, even when everyone else is mesmerized by their new radar systems. The final image is Elias handing Chloe his old, worn-out ledger from that day. He's not giving it to her as a relic, but as a guide. Her hand rests on the cover, a symbolic passing of the torch from one generation to the next. Real greatness is never about the authority you claim, but about the responsibility you quietly carry. If you believe wisdom is timeless, follow for more stories of true victory.